west, to the birthplace of our dynasty.
Melania and Miquella aren't the only cursed demigod twins in the lands between. Before them came Mohg and Morgott, born of the joining between Queen Marika the Eternal and the Lord of the Battlefield, Godfrey. Born Omen, the brothers were fated to never see the light of the Erd Tree, and yet, whilst they shared accursed blood and had notions of ruling, they went down very different paths. One ascended, content to dwell within the shadow of the Golden Tree, where the other descended deeper and deeper, becoming known as the Lord of Blood. Therein seems to lie the fundamental difference between Morgott and Mohg, the former despising his curse, the latter embracing it. It seems plain that both Morgott and Mohg possessed accursed blood, which seems to have made them prime candidates to receive the blessing of one of the outer gods, the formless mother, also known as the Mother of Truth, no relation to Erden, we assume. Mohg had an encounter with this outer god. When Mohg stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire. This also seems to have been, potentially, the catalyst for him to grow besotted with the filth he was born into, and the start of his grand ambition. As for Morgott's involvement with the Formless Mother, we don't know the extent of it, if indeed there was any, and we'll go over that more when we get to him. But for the time being, it seems likely that if he did have any connection with her, Morgott has since renounced her, along with his cursed blood. When it comes to Mohg, we know that his ultimate goal is the birth of a dynasty, the Mogwyn dynasty. Just why he seeks this is unclear. White Mask Vare was seduced by whatever it was Mohg promised. Vare seems to believe that was strength, as well as love. Yet it seems likely these were empty promises. Gideon Ofnir and the description of Mohg's robes posit that he is, effectively, out of his mind. The dress of Illusionary, the reigning lord and hierarch of the coming dynasty of Mogwyn, or perhaps of a raving lunatic. Whether his madness was a symptom of his exposure to the outer god is unclear, but it wouldn't be a stretch to say that the Mother of Truths had a hand in this, consciously or otherwise. After all, if a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, then omniscience must be lethal. Mohg appears to be using Vare to gather blood for a very singular goal. Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty. That goal being to raise Miquella to godhood. At some point prior to the start of the game, although we don't know for sure how long ago, Mohg abducted Miquella, his half-brother, from where he slumbered within his Halig tree. How did Mohg manage this though? As many have found out, the Halig tree, home to the forlorn and forsaken, is not an easy place to find, let alone storm. And does Mohg even have the forces for such an assault? I think not. The abduction of Miquella likely revolved around two key points. First up, Melania being absent or otherwise incapacitated. Considering how secretive the Omen brothers are, we don't know for certain just how strong they are compared to storied heroes such as Radahn and Melania. But, Omen or not, they are still children of Queen Marika and Godfrey. Miquella, meanwhile, seems to have looked in favour upon Godwyn, another of his half-brothers, but just what did he think of his Omen siblings? Was he aware of them? Did he understand their strengths? If so, would he take precautions against them? The second point in his abduction, I believe, is that Mohg infiltrated and abducted him using something not unlike mimicry, which we'll touch on shortly. Wishing to raise Miquella to full godhood, Mohg wished to become his consort, taking the role of monarch, But no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. Within his palace, deep underground by the Shifra River, he dwells within the cocoon of Miquella, trying to imbue his half-brother with the gift of noble blood, which he seems to think will raise the Empyrean to full godhood, circumventing whatever method was planned for Rani or another Empyrean to take Marika's place. But as we know nothing of what that would entail, it is possible he was on the right path, and yet Miquella isn't responding to this treatment. Is the treatment itself flawed, or is Miquella's body no more than an empty husk, the soul long since fled? In my opinion, the latter. As for Mohg, his relationship with Miquella is clearly a perversion, but incest isn't historically something all that rare with these royal families. The truth of just what Mohg is up to is known to very few. Gideon Ofnir certainly wasn't aware, as Mohg's plans appear to have been carried out in secret. Gideon doesn't even appear to know that the Lord of Blood was Mohg, and as you are no doubt aware, there is a shade of Mohg where he should be, deep under Leyndell. You'll notice that Mohg the Omen, when defeated, disperses in the same golden sparks as does Margit the Fell Omen. And whilst there is never any mention as to this magic or incantation, it does appear that each of the brothers are able to project themselves in some form. In Morgoth's case, we get a rather good example of it outside of Leyndell, where he appears to possess the body of another in some fashion, projecting a version of himself so he can strike at Tarnished from far, far away. And in Mohg's case, he planted this fake where people expected him to be, so that his true endeavours as the Lord of Blood would go unnoticed. How very sly. The nature of this seemingly shared ability is a mystery. No doubt it is some form of incantation, as both Omen use various other incantations, Mohg's mostly being blood flame incantations associated with the Mother of Truth. But the only clue I can think of as to the specific ability's origin is that it was perhaps passed down from Marika. Golden Veil of Intricate Design. When Godric was hounded from Leyndell, the royal capital, this was one of a multitude of treasures he took with him, also known as Marika's Mischief. Aye, bit of a stretch, but it isn't beyond the realm of possibility that Marika had incantations of highly advanced mimicry. Another tangential connection would be the similar golden sparks when using the veil, as when the fake Mohg and Margit disperse. Marika was able to transform herself into Radagon, so who is to say she couldn't create doubles of herself in some form? And if her Omen children inherited this, that could explain just how Mohg was able to infiltrate the Helig tree. Indeed, maybe it was this that allowed them to escape their bondage in the first place. But on that same note, if Morgoth were able to take on another form, wouldn't he? Perhaps Morgoth isn't as self-loathing as all that, but given the chance to appear as anything but an Omen, maybe he would take it. Whereas Mohg embraced the filth of his jail, and no doubt his being an Omen, so that stands up. It is something to think about, and a possible explanation for this power they both share. And on a semi-related note, it would bear some slight resemblance to the golden sorceries of Ulasil from Dark Souls. These golden sorceries involved the bending of space, time, and light itself to achieve things such as invisibility, mimicry, and the repairing of equipment, through a sort of reversing of entropy. But there's something else to remark upon, given where we find Mohg the Omen, so very close to the Three Fingers, emissary of the yellow chaos flame. Is this purely coincidence? The caravan merchants were hounded underground and sealed away, rather like the Omen and their shunning grounds, so the proximity could be happenstance. Unless the Formless Mother is the frenzied flame. But I'm inclined to think all of this is a coincidence, as no immediate connections between Mohg and the flame leap out at me, other than, well, I suppose Mohg is rather insane, and most of the frenzied flame followers are not right in the head. The formation of a dynasty seems to run directly counter to the flame's goal of burning away all boundaries, returning the many to the one. Perhaps Mohg wishes to become one with Miquella, but other than that, no, I see no obvious connection. What about you though? Blood flame incantations are distinct enough that I believe Mohg's relation is to just one outer god, that being the Mother of Truth. Besides, the Chaos Flame has its own champions in Shabriri and, potentially, the Tarnished, should they tread that path. Mohg's ultimate goal appears to be establishing a dynasty. He's a sociopathic narcissist with some very disturbing proclivities. But is he cruel and seeking the subjugation of others, or would he really create a dynasty of noble love, as Vari seemed to hope for? Maybe this raving lunatic should be left well enough alone, but we can't ignore the fact that he is largely responsible for the bloody fingers who hunt Tarnished, and that fact alone would condemn him in the eyes of many. Would you join his dynasty?